If you ever find yourself on the high desert ridges of Black Mesa after midnight, you know the world changes. Shadows grow deeper, the wind sharpens, and old stories linger in the dust. That's where Nina Brightcloud was sent, a solo patrol, last minute, ordered by her supervisor Brooks with a sly smirk and a tap on the patrol roster that didn't quite match her memory. Still, Nina was the newest wildlife ranger in the unit, and she knew how to keep her head down. She also knew, deep inside, that nothing about this night felt right. The moon was a ghostly coin over the canyons, silver light barely cutting through the crooked junipers and spiny sage. Nina's truck rattled along the rough fire road, her radio crackling in and out of static. No backup, no explanation for the patrol, except a vague, possible poachers in Sector 6. Her dark eyes narrowed. Poachers, sure, but why alone? She took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the lanyard with her army dog tags. Old instincts pricked at the back of her neck. She parked near a stand of petrified wood, killed the lights, and started the slow, careful hike down into the moon-shadowed ravine. The silence was huge. She heard her boots crunch, the faint click of her flashlight, and somewhere distant, the yip of coyotes. Every step felt watched. Nina's mind ran over Brooks's face again, the way he'd smiled just a little too long, like he was waiting for something. She found the first sign by a stunted cedar, fresh boot prints, bigger than hers, running off trail into the dark. Nina knelt, scanning the ground with practiced hands. More prints, 3, maybe 4 men, moving with purpose, heavy souls. Not tourists, not kids. Her heart thudded once, hard. She straightened, hand moving to her bear spray, and took another step. Then the world exploded. A rope snapped tight around her ankle, yanking her off her feet. She crashed to the ground, air knocked out of her, and before she could shout, a gloved hand covered her mouth. Another figure wrenched her wrists behind her back. In the moonlight, she caught a glimpse of a black mask, eyes cold and empty. Her body bucked with old training, twisting, but someone drove a knee into her ribs. Pain shot up her side, then duct tape across her mouth, rough rope binding her arms, blood sticky on her cheek from the struggle. Nina's mind screamed, but her voice was nothing but a muffled gasp. They dragged her deeper into the canyon, boots scuffing the gravel, their words harsh whispers. "That's her," Brooks said solo. Didn't think she'd fight. Watch her head. A punch landed behind her ear. Stars burst behind her eyes. Then nothing but spinning black. She woke hanging upside down from a low juniper, ankles lashed to a branch, arms pinned, her head pounding with every heartbeat. Blood dripped down her hair, blurring her vision. The world rocked and swung, and in that weird, floating pain she heard the mercenaries arguing by their truck, their voices bouncing off the rocks. "She's not dead yet." Brooks said, "Scare her. Make it look like an accident, right? No witnesses, man. Finish it and let the coyotes." "You do it. She's army. What if she wakes up?" A fist crashed into her ribs again, stealing her breath. Her mind slid away, but she forced herself back. Coyotes howled nearby, too close, hungry. Something rustled in the brush, heavier than any coyote. The men cursed, tossing rocks, their nerves starting to fray. Nina's thoughts scattered. Her grandmother's voice, the hum of old songs, the feeling of home. But mostly, she felt anger. Not fear, anger. She twisted, ropes cutting into her skin. If she passed out now, it was over. If she stayed awake, maybe. Minutes crawled. The mercenaries dumped her backpack, scattered her radio, then got spooked by a distant siren and peeled out, tires spinning. Nina hung, half-conscious, blood trickling into her eyes, coyotes yipping louder. The sky spun, her ankle throbbed with each heartbeat. She tried to swing, to catch a branch, but the pain was blinding. Then, the wild presence. At first she thought it was a fever dream, a shadow gliding between the rocks. Moonlight caught in a mane, and out of the gloom stepped a mustang, ash gray, scars slashed across its shoulder. It stood silent, watching her, breath steaming in the cold. Nina blinked, not trusting her senses. The mustang crept closer, ears back, eyes full of challenge. The coyotes slunk away, whining, outmatched. The horse sniffed at the blood on the rope, then, astonishingly, began to chew at the knot. Teeth worked, lips peeled back, and Nina felt the branch shudder. "Come on, please," her mind willed, her own voice lost in the tape. The rope snapped, and she crashed to the ground, air bursting from her lungs. The mustang pawed the dirt, snorting, then nudged her, hard, until her vision cleared. She crawled to her knees, dizzy, leg screaming. The mustang watched, fierce and wild, then stepped forward again, lowering its massive head. Nina reached, caught the mane, and for a wild moment, felt the world tilt on its axis. That was the night Nina Brightcloud learned that not all saviors wear badges. Some run with the wild. Coyotes howled, the moon slipped behind a cloud, and a new story began. One not written by Brooks or any badge, but by the blood and will of those who refused to give up. Nina was barely aware of the ground beneath her as she tried to crawl away from the juniper where she'd been left to die. The pain in her ankles screamed with every inch she moved, her arms and legs numb and shaky from being tied so long, blood drying on her cheek. The taste of copper filled her mouth as she spat out the tape, lungs burning for air. All around her, the canyon night pressed close, heavy, wild, humming with danger. She looked up. The mustang was still there. In the dim moonlight, he seemed both impossibly real and like something conjured from an old tale. Ash gray, scarred, his eyes dark as the midnight sky. He stomped once, pawing the earth, and Nina felt the brush of survival instinct rise in her again. Move or you won't make it. The coyotes were still nearby, their calls echoing, their hunger sharp. But Ash, she found herself naming him already, stood between her and them, ears pinned, tail high, every muscle tense. He didn't look tame. He looked like the wild itself, come alive to judge her fate. She tried to stand, only to collapse as a jolt of agony shot through her ankle. For a moment, Nina closed her eyes, dizzy. She couldn't stay here. The mercenaries might return. The desert got colder with every hour, and the blood on her face meant every predator would know she was wounded. She pushed herself up on her elbows and reached for Ash, her fingers trembling. The mustang stepped closer, sniffed her hair, and huffed, the sound hot and strange in the freezing air. With a surprising gentleness, he pressed his nose against her shoulder, steadying her as she wobbled to her feet. Nina leaned her weight against his neck, grit and pain in every breath. For a moment she thought she'd black out again. The world spun, the moon flickered in and out behind clouds. But Ash was patient. He nudged her, insisting, and when she managed to swing her leg awkwardly over his back, he stood stone still. Nina clung to his mane, fighting waves of nausea. In the distance, headlights swept over the canyon wall. The mercenary's truck was circling back, its engine low and menacing. Nina's heart hammered in her chest. No time. Ash picked his way through the rocks with uncanny care, taking trails Nina would never have chosen in daylight, let alone at night. His hooves barely made a sound on the loose gravel, and he skirted the open spaces, moving through the brush like a shadow. Nina's eyes kept flicking back, expecting the glare of headlights or the sharp report of a rifle. Every little sound made her flinch. A rock fall, a rattling juniper branch, the distant bark of a coyote. She pressed herself as flat as she could against Ash's back, hiding in his wildness. Somewhere along the way, her strength gave out. She drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain in her ankle a distant ache, her body numb from shock. She was vaguely aware of Ash pausing, nosing her leg, as if checking to see if she was still alive. His coat was rough beneath her hands, matted with dust and old scars. He smelled like sage, sweat, and something ancient. Each time she slipped toward darkness, he'd toss his head or shift his weight, forcing her awake. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Please, just a little farther." The journey felt endless. Sometimes Ash would stop and stand still for minutes, his ears flicking back and forth, sensing danger Nina couldn't see. At one point they heard voices, the mercenaries searching, flashlights dancing over the rocks below. Nina's pulse raced. Ash pressed himself behind a clump of boulders, lowering his head until even his silhouette melted into the shadows. The men passed close, cursing and grumbling, but moved on. Nina didn't dare breathe. As the sky began to lighten with the faintest hint of dawn, Ash led her to a narrow stream at the base of the canyon. Nina slid off his back, landing with a cry as her ankle buckled. She crawled to the water's edge, splashing her face, gulping down mouthfuls of icy water. Her hands shook. Ash drank too, standing guard, his flanks shuddering from exhaustion. They were both pushed to the limit, Nina's body broken and battered, Ash's legs trembling, his sides heaving. For a while they rested there. Nina pressed a wet bandana to her wounds, gritting her teeth against the pain. Ash grazed on dry grass, never straying far. At one point, a coyote crept close, drawn by Nina's blood. Ash lunged, teeth bared, sending it yelping into the brush. Nina watched, a mixture of awe and gratitude filling her chest. She'd been saved by a horse most would call untamable. Finally, when she felt she could move again, Nina called to Ash, her voice rough but steady. "I need your help, boy. One more time." He walked over, lowering himself just enough for her to scramble back onto his back. Nina wrapped her arms around his neck and let herself lean into his warmth. This time Ash moved even slower, his energy fading, but he never faltered. The last stretch to the ranger station was a blur of agony and hope. Nina fought to stay awake, repeating her name and badge number over and over, willing herself not to fade. Ash's head drooped, but he kept going, step by painful step, until at last the outlines of the station buildings rose on the ridge above. Nina slumped forward, tears of relief stinging her eyes. Ash stopped, stamping his hooves and letting out a shrill whinny that echoed across the mesa. Lights flicked on in the distance, doors opened, and voices shouted in alarm. Nina tried to wave, but her strength was gone. She heard people running toward her, someone calling her name. The last thing Nina remembered before everything went black was Ash's breath on her cheek. And the thought, wild, impossible, and real, that sometimes the wild finds you and refuses to let you die. The world returned in blurry pieces. Voices, footsteps, bright lights behind her eyelids. Nina tried to lift her head, but pain shot down her shoulder and through her ankle, rooting her in place. Someone pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. She caught snatches of words. "Found her! Can you hear me? Don't move! Medic's on the way!" She forced her eyes open. It was sunrise, pink and orange splintering across the wide New Mexico sky, painting the Black Mesa cliffs in fire. Nina blinked at the unfamiliar faces, deputy rangers in green jackets, hands gentle but urgent. Through the blur, she saw Deputy Carla Torres kneeling beside her, steady and unflappable, the one familiar anchor in a flood of chaos. "Nina, you're safe now. You're back." Carla's voice cut through the confusion like a lifeline. "Just breathe. EMTs are coming." For a split second, Nina wanted to argue, wanted to leap up, say she was fine, get back to her job. But her body had other plans. The pain in her ankle was white hot. Her shoulder burned. Every breath scraped her chest. As she tried to sit up, Carla held her down, gentle but firm. "Easy. Let's not add a concussion to the list. You're lucky you made it back at all." "Lucky," the word echoed. Nina's gaze darted around. She spotted the scarred gray Mustang standing apart from the crowd, his coat catching the morning light. Ash looked battered but unbroken, flanks still rising with each deep, steady breath. A few rookie rangers eyed him warily, whispering, ready to shoo him away. But he held his ground, unmoving, eyes locked on Nina as if daring anyone to approach. The EMTs arrived, voices brisk and professional, rolling Nina onto a stretcher with practiced care. She hissed in pain, fists clenched. The station yard was alive with noise, vehicles, radios, startled calls. Ash's wild presence made it even more surreal. Carla stayed close, matching Nina's breathing, whispering words of reassurance. Inside the ranger station, they did a full assessment. Nina's wounds were real and ugly. A deep cut on her head, a badly sprained ankle, bruises on her ribs, rope burns, dehydration. They stitched her up, iced her injuries, wrapped her ankle tight. All the while, the pain kept her locked to the present, but her mind spiraled back to the ambush, the masked men, the cruelty in Brooks's eyes before she left. She tried to piece it all together. She kept failing. Nightmares came quickly and wouldn't let go. She saw herself hanging upside down, heard the hiss of coyotes, the crunch of boots in gravel, voices murmuring about making her death look like an accident. Sometimes she jolted awake with a scream caught in her throat. Other times, she woke sweating, her hands gripping the sheets, her heart hammering against her ribs. Carla visited every morning, bringing strong coffee and gentle patience. "You fought, Nina. You survived something ugly. Don't try to carry it alone." But Nina couldn't talk about it. Not yet. Not with the team, not with Carla, and certainly not with Brooks, who avoided her entirely, sending only terse texts about recovery protocol and upcoming investigations. Ash lingered outside the station. He never came too close, but he was always there at dawn and dusk, grazing near the fence or watching the road with restless eyes. Some of the rangers said he was a bad omen, that wild horses brought trouble, that maybe he'd caused the ambush somehow. Others, especially the rookies who'd heard the story spreading like wildfire, whispered that Ash was a miracle, a guardian sent by the spirits, or maybe by fate itself. Arguments flared in the common room. The station divided along invisible lines, those who feared the wild and those who honored it. Nina's recovery was slow. She refused to be sent home, insisted on light duty, helping catalog patrol logs and repair equipment. She hid her limp as best she could, but every step was a reminder of what she'd survived and how close she'd come to not making it out. When she wasn't working, she found herself drawn to the window watching for Ash. Sometimes she caught him watching back, his gaze measuring, cautious, but never afraid. As days passed, strange things happened around the station. A herd of stray cattle blocked the road one morning, but when the rangers arrived, they found Ash standing calmly between the herd and the highway, herding them away from danger before disappearing into the brush. At night, more than once, rookie rangers reported seeing a gray shadow moving along the perimeter, as if Ash was standing guard. Some nights, Nina heard his distant whinny, oddly reassuring, a wild voice promising that she wasn't alone. But the suspicion never faded. A few rangers muttered about relocating Ash to a sanctuary, worried he'd spook the horses or break a fence. The lead mechanic claimed Ash chewed through wires on his truck, though Nina knew it was a coyote, not the Mustang. The debate raged. Was Ash a blessing or a curse? For Nina, Ash became her anchor. In quiet moments, she'd limp outside with an apple or a handful of oats, holding her breath as Ash stepped closer, his nose twitching, eyes wary. He never let her touch him. Not really. But he didn't run either. It was enough. And as Nina struggled with her own guilt, memories of army missions gone wrong, friends she couldn't save, she found herself clinging to Ash's silent, stubborn presence. She realized that healing, for both horse and human, was never fast or easy. It was slow, uneven, built on trust that had to be earned day by day. One evening, as the sun bled out over the mesa and the shadows lengthened, Carla found Nina at the fence. They stood together in the fading light, watching Ash graze at the edge of the wild. "He's not yours to keep, you know," Carla said quietly. "I know," Nina replied, "but maybe we're both here for a reason." As night fell, the station seemed to breathe a little easier. But under the calm, suspicion still simmered, and somewhere in the darkness, danger waited for a chance to return. Recovery was supposed to bring Nina peace, but as days turned to weeks, her wounds healed slower than her suspicion. The ambush replayed behind her eyes every time she closed them, the details sharp and shifting. Brooks's instructions, the empty radio, masked men whose faces blurred at the edges of memory. She could barely walk without pain, yet her mind refused to rest. Carla noticed. It was Carla who quietly nudged her back toward the world, and then deeper, toward the truth. "Let's start with the patrol logs," Carla suggested one afternoon, sliding into the chair beside Nina in the cramped back office. The hum of old computers filled the air, the scent of strong coffee and desert dust hanging between them. "Maybe we find a glitch, maybe we don't. Either way, you're not in this alone." Nina almost smiled. She didn't want to admit how much she needed the support. She let Carla take the lead, watching as her friend pulled up shift schedules, digital files, patrol maps, layer by layer, the ordinary paperwork of the ranger service. But quickly, patterns emerged. Orders for the solo patrol had been backdated. Brooks's digital signature was there, but the timestamp didn't match the printout Nina received. A second log showed Brooks on site the night of the attack, though he'd claimed to be out sick. The deeper they dug, the thicker the web became. Nina felt adrenaline mixing with fear, old military instincts waking up. This wasn't just a mistake. Someone had tried to erase her. Carla scribbled notes, her expression growing more serious with every file. "Who has the power to do this?" Nina whispered, her voice barely a thread. "Only Brooks. Maybe one other in admin. But why me?" Carla's jaw tightened. "You asked questions about the cattle poaching ring. You found the cut fences, the boot prints. Brooks told you to drop it. Maybe you were getting too close." A silence settled, heavy as the mesa dusk. They both knew the risks. If Brooks was tied to something darker, smuggling, payoffs, organized poaching, the ambush was just the beginning. Meanwhile, life at the station carried on, split by tension and rumor. Ash, the wild Mustang, became a legend and a point of argument. Every rookie wanted to spot him. Every senior ranger wanted him gone. One evening, a tour bus nearly ran off the road when Ash appeared out of nowhere, herding stray cattle off the blacktop with calculated swiftness, then vanishing into the sage. The local news snapped a blurry photo, "Ghost Horse saves the day," the headline read. The public loved it. Inside the station, though, nerves frayed. Ash watched over the station at night, patrolling the perimeter, sometimes standing motionless for hours. Some claimed he was searching for Nina. Others swore he kept wild predators away. Only Nina saw the truth. Ash was as haunted as she was, drawn to the boundary between safety and wildness, never quite belonging. Nina clung to these moments of quiet with Ash, finding a strange peace in his silent company. She brought apples, sat on the splintered fence and talked softly about her time in the army, about friends she lost, about the guilt that never seemed to leave. Ash listened, unmoving, only the occasional flick of an ear betraying any interest. She told him about her worst fear, that she'd been betrayed from within, that Brooks wasn't done, that she might put Carla or the rookies in danger by digging deeper. Carla, for her part, was relentless. She ran background checks on the mercenaries who'd been spotted in the area that night, cross-referenced plate numbers from traffic cams, and started quietly interviewing other rangers. Some remembered Brooks receiving late-night calls, cash deliveries that didn't match his salary, odd equipment missing from the shed. Others were too scared to talk. The atmosphere in the station changed. Everyone knew something was coming, but no one wanted to say it out loud. At night, Nina's nightmares returned. She relived the ambush, but now the masked men had voices, one calling her by name, another laughing in a way that reminded her too much of Brooks. The anxiety clawed at her, making her second-guess every interaction. She kept her phone close, texted Carla when she couldn't sleep, checked the windows for headlights or shadows moving where they shouldn't. It was Ash, again, who grounded her. On a night when sleep was impossible and the pain in her ankle flared, she found herself limping out to the corral. Ash was there, his coat ghostly in the moonlight. She leaned on the fence and let herself cry, silent and bitter. Ash walked over, pressed his forehead to her shoulder, and stood there, anchored and unafraid, until she could breathe again. The next morning, Carla burst in with a look that told Nina the world had shifted. "I found it," she said, tossing a stack of printouts onto Nina's cot. Altered logs, cash transfers, encrypted emails. All roads lead to Brooks, and he's been in contact with a group flagged for smuggling. Wildlife, cattle, you name it. This goes deep. Nina felt her hands tremble. "Do we take it to the chief?" Carla shook her head. "Not yet. We can't trust anyone else. We have to get all the evidence, lock it down, and make it public. Otherwise, it disappears, like you almost did." Outside, Ash circled the station, keeping his wild vigil. Inside, Nina and Carla quietly prepared for war. Trust was a luxury now. Every day felt like walking a cliff's edge, but they walked it together. That night, as a dry wind swept over the mesa and coyotes howled at the waxing moon, Nina made a silent vow. Whatever it cost, she wouldn't let Brooks bury the truth. She'd survived the wild. Now she had to survive the wolves inside the fence. The feeling in the ranger station changed almost overnight. Where once there was only tension and suspicion, now there was a sense of urgency, a quiet desperation that wound tighter with every passing hour. Nina and Carla worked in shadows, barely trusting the walls around them, always careful to keep their voices low, their plans vague in front of the others. They both knew the time for caution was almost over. The evidence was damning. As Carla pieced together encrypted emails, falsified payrolls, and tracking data, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Brooks wasn't just a corrupt supervisor. He was the inside man for a sophisticated network, running everything from illegal wildlife trafficking to livestock theft and smuggling across state lines. The night of Nina's ambush, he'd sent the mercenaries not just to scare her, but to eliminate a liability. Late one night, with rain tapping against the station's tin roof, Nina stared at the laptop screen in disbelief. She felt a cold, righteous fury take hold. "He sold us out, Carla, all of us." She glanced at her friend, whose face was set in lines of worry and resolve. Carla nodded. "And now he's cornered. I leaked just enough. Word's out, the brass knows, the feds are sniffing around, and Brooks is scrambling, but he's not going down easy." She lowered her voice. "You should go home tonight, Nina. Sleep somewhere safe." But Nina shook her head. "He's desperate. If he makes a move, it'll be now. I'm not leaving anyone behind." Carla didn't argue. Instead, she closed the office blinds, flicked off her phone, and began to organize what would be their last stand. "We need to get the files off-site. If anything happens, people have to know the truth. I'll handle the upload. Encrypted, multiple servers. You organize the team, quietly." The next day, the station felt like a pressure cooker. Brooks was nowhere to be seen, but his presence hovered like a bad smell. Doors opening and closing in the night. Shadowy figures spotted on the far fences. Unknown trucks idling down by the old barn. The rookies pretended not to notice, but their eyes tracked every movement. Even the horses sensed it. They stamped and whickered, restless, refusing feed. Ash kept to the perimeter, his gray coat ghosting through the sage. He seemed to understand something was coming. More than once, Nina caught him staring at the main gate, muscles tensed, tail flicking. Each evening, he stood guard until the sun disappeared. By twilight, Nina and Carla called the rangers they trusted. 3, maybe 4. They met in the musty break room, lights dimmed. Nina spoke quickly, quietly, laying out the stakes. "We're not just fighting for this station. We're fighting for every honest ranger, every wild creature, every family who's been cheated and bullied by Brooks and his crew. Tonight we stand together, or we lose everything." Carla showed them the evidence, files flickering across the laptop. The group listened in stunned silence. A rookie named Jamal whispered, "If we blow the whistle, they'll come for us. Tonight." Nina met his eyes. "That's why we're not running. We're defending what's ours. If they want a fight, we give them one, but on our terms." She outlined the plan. Barricade the doors, secure the evidence, rig the perimeter with makeshift alarms, tin cans, fishing line, anything that could buy them time. Radios were checked, flashlights handed out, everyone assigned a station. Ash would be left loose inside the main yard, his presence both shield and warning. Darkness crept over the mesa. The mood was grim, but unified. The rangers moved in silence, rolling desks against doors, covering windows with whatever they could find. Carla checked her phone, watching as the evidence upload crawled from one server to another. Nina checked her sidearm, loaded bear spray into her vest, and ran through escape routes in her head. The whole time she watched for Brooks, certain he would strike before dawn. Around midnight, a call came in from a ranger on patrol. Headlights moving fast, more than one vehicle. Then the line went dead. A wave of adrenaline swept through the station. Carla locked the comms room. Nina rallied the team, and Ash paced the fence, snorting, every muscle coiled. They heard the first engine cut, doors slamming, boots crunching on gravel. Shadows darted by the windows, voices low and tense. Someone tried the front door, found it locked, then cursed and moved on. The attackers circled the station, searching for a weak spot. Nina crouched behind a file cabinet, radio in hand, listening to the chaos outside. She caught flashes of faces in the yard. Mercenaries in black jackets, rifles slung low. One fired a shot into the air, a warning more than a threat. Another tried the back door, found it barred. Then Ash erupted into action. He charged the fence, smashing through a rotten post, rearing and lashing out with his hooves. The mercenaries scattered, startled by the fury of a wild Mustang defending his territory. Ash chased one clear across the yard before wheeling back, eyes rolling, nostrils flaring. Inside, Nina's team braced themselves. Someone pounded on the side door, then the lights flickered and went out. Total darkness. Carla's voice came over the radio, steady as stone. "Stick to the plan. Hold your ground. Backup's coming. Just hold." Nina gripped her bear spray, heart pounding. The sound of shattering glass rang out. Then silence, thick as velvet. For one breathless moment, nothing moved. Outside, Ash let out a cry that echoed through the night. The defenders dug in, knowing the next attack would be worse. But Nina felt something shift inside her. Fear replaced by resolve. She'd been ambushed before. She'd survived. And this time, she wasn't alone. The trap was set. Now they waited for the enemy to make their move. The darkness pressing against the ranger station felt almost alive, humming with violence and fear. Nina's world shrank to the shallow pool of light from her dying flashlight and the pounding of her own heart. Outside, the mercenaries regrouped in the shadows, their voices rough and low, orders clipped. Somewhere beyond the broken fence, Ash circled the perimeter, his silhouette flickering in the half-moon, wild and unbroken. Inside, Nina's team braced themselves. The air tasted like dust and adrenaline, the station filled with the smells of sweat and metal and fear. Jamal clutched his radio, face pale but jaw set. Carla finished barricading the main entrance, her eyes hard as flint. The other loyal rangers moved between windows and dark corners, each one clutching bear spray, flashlights, or whatever blunt objects they could find. Everyone's nerves were drawn taut, but they held, because there was no one else to hold for them. The first real wave hit just past 1 in the morning. Someone cut the power from outside, plunging the building into total darkness, then shattered the side window with the butt of a rifle. Shards of glass sprayed across the file room, scattering paper like falling snow. A masked figure lunged through the opening. Nina was already moving, army training taking over. She hit the intruder in the face with bear spray. He howled, staggering backward, firing blindly. A bullet shattered the old wall clock above her head, gears raining down. Nina rolled aside, grabbing Jamal and pulling him behind a desk as another figure climbed through, swinging a crowbar. On the far side of the building, 2 more mercenaries kicked in the back door. Carla and rookie ranger Elena met them head-on, using fire extinguishers and flashbangs from an old patrol kit. For a few frantic seconds, chaos reigned. Shouts, footsteps, the crash of bodies hitting furniture. Elena screamed, struck across the shoulder by a swinging rifle, but Carla tackled the attacker before he could finish the job, pinning him with desperate strength. Outside, Ash was a ghost in the night, limping from his earlier exhaustion but refusing to retreat. He charged at a mercenary trying to breach the stable, teeth bared, hooves pounding. The man turned, panicked, and fired, missing by inches. Ash wheeled and kicked, sending the attacker flying. In the confusion, the other horses in the pen stampeded, creating a living wall that the mercenaries struggled to push through. Nina crawled through the shattered side office, blood slicking her arm from a fresh cut. She pressed her radio to her lips, voice shaking but steady. "Carla, status?" "We're holding. Elena's hurt but breathing. They're not inside, not yet. Upload's at 70%. Just hold." "Copy. Watch the west side. One's trying the utility room." She heard footsteps above. Someone on the roof. The mercenaries were trying to find a way in through the attic. Nina's mind raced, cataloging every possible entry point. She hustled Jamal and another rookie down a side hall, pushing a desk against the crawlspace hatch. "If they get through, you use this." She handed Jamal a canister of pepper spray. "No heroics, just survive." Back in the yard, Ash was losing steam. He limped, bleeding from a graze on his haunch. But when another masked man tried to corner him against the barn, Ash lashed out, forcing the man to scramble for cover. The standoff was wild, messy, a testament to instinct over training. Inside, the fight shifted again. The mercenaries finally blew the lock on the main door with a shotgun blast. Nina and Carla met them in the foyer, using radios to signal the team, triggering a cacophony of alarms, cans clattering, lights flickering, fire extinguishers going off in the hallway. The attackers pushed forward, their leader shouting over the noise. A burly mercenary leveled his rifle at Carla. Nina lunged, using a broom handle to knock the weapon aside. The man swung, catching Nina in the shoulder. Pain shot down her arm, but she held her ground, using every ounce of army training to keep the attackers off balance. Carla deployed a flashbang, an old model, but effective. The mercenaries staggered, temporarily blinded. For a moment, the world spun into slow motion. Nina saw Ash outside the shattered window, rearing and shrieking, a wild, desperate sound. Carla dragged Elena behind cover as more shots rang out. Nina ducked as bullets shredded the reception counter, splinters flying past her ear. Another mercenary tackled her, sending them both crashing into a pile of gear. Nina bit, clawed, elbowed, anything to survive. She finally broke free, slamming the man with her casted ankle. Suddenly, the front yard was flooded with headlights. Someone had called in help. The attackers faltered, not expecting resistance or witnesses. Ash staggered toward the light, blocking the mercenaries' escape route. One of them fired again. Nina watched, horror gripping her, as Ash stumbled but refused to go down. Carla's voice crackled in Nina's ear, tight with pain. 90%! Just keep them busy a little longer! The Rangers rallied, pushing the attackers back toward the yard. Nina grabbed a flare and fired it through the broken window, the red light arcing over the scene, painting everything in wild shadows. The mercenaries, caught between the Rangers, the Mustang, and now the headlights of approaching vehicles, broke ranks and scattered, some vaulting the fence, others fleeing toward the dark hills. But it wasn't over. Nina collapsed behind the ruined desk, clutching her bleeding shoulder, breathing hard. Ash limped to her side, battered but still standing, pressing his head against her chest for just a moment. An impossible bond in the midst of violence. The upload continued. The night was far from done, but the Rangers had survived, wounded, shaken, but unbroken. Nina looked at her bloodied team, at Ash's trembling flanks, and whispered to the night, "We're still here. You didn't break us." And somewhere in the wild dark, the mesa heard her and held its breath for dawn. Dawn was still a rumor on the horizon as the ranger station held its breath, battered but not beaten. The smell of gunpowder, sweat, and fear hung thick in the air, mingling with the copper tang of spilled blood and the faint, persistent scent of wild sage blown in through shattered windows. For a moment, all Nina heard was the desperate, uneven breathing of her team, the far-off wail of a siren, and the heartbeat thunder in her own ears. Ash was by her side, trembling, blood matting his gray flank. Nina pressed her hand against his neck, grounding herself in the heat and strength beneath his hide. She wanted nothing more than to collapse, to let exhaustion swallow her whole. But the fight was not over. The mercenaries were regrouping outside, and somewhere in the chaos, Brooks was still at large. She forced herself to her feet, every nerve on fire. Carla crawled over, clutching her side. Upload's almost done. 10 more seconds, maybe less. Nina, you see Brooks? Nina shook her head. He's here. He wouldn't run before the evidence is wiped. A shot rang out, shattering what remained of the reception window. Nina dropped, dragging Carla with her behind the desk. Ash reared up with a snort of fury, placing himself between the glass and the women. Defiant despite his wounds. More shots. The mercenaries were desperate now, cornered by their own violence and the knowledge that backup was inbound. Over the radio, Nina heard the voice of one of the rookies. 2 vehicles coming up the access road. Looks like County Sheriff and Fish and Wildlife. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes might as well have been an eternity. Nina risked a look through the ragged curtain. She spotted Brooks, pale and sweating, standing with 2 mercenaries at the edge of the yard. He was holding something, her file thick with evidence. With shaking hands, he set it on the hood of a battered truck and began pouring gasoline over it. A lighter appeared in his hand. "No!" Nina gasped, adrenaline washing away her pain. She jumped to her feet, sprinting out the front door, shoulder blazing with agony. Brooks saw her and smiled, a sneer twisting his lips. "Stay back, Bright Cloud. You don't want to do this." "Drop it!" Nina shouted, voice cracking with the force of her desperation. Behind her, Carla hobbled after, sidearm drawn, her face a mask of determination. Brooks flicked the lighter. For a second, everything seemed to freeze. The mercenaries shifting nervously, the rangers bracing themselves, Ash stamping his hooves, torn between fight and collapse. Then Nina lunged forward. Brooks hurled the lighter onto the file, flames leaping up. Nina barely hesitated, plunging her bare hands into the fire, pulling the file clear, the heat searing her palms. She flung it behind her to Carla, who kicked dirt over the burning edges, stamping out the flames. Brooks roared in frustration and drew his gun, firing wildly. Nina dove behind the truck as bullets chewed up gravel around her. Ash charged, placing himself between Nina and Brooks, a wall of muscle and fury. Brooks, panicking, fired at the Mustang. The bullet grazed Ash's shoulder, but he didn't back down. Instead, he reared up and kicked, knocking the gun from Brooks's hand. The mercenaries, realizing the tide had turned, made a break for the fence, only to be met by the newly arriving sheriff's deputies. One by one, they dropped their weapons, falling to their knees in the dust. Brooks, desperate, tried to make a run for the open desert. Nina, bloodied and exhausted, forced herself to follow. She caught up to him at the edge of the mesa, the sun finally breaking free of the mountains and setting the world ablaze with gold. Brooks whirled, a second pistol in his hand, finger trembling on the trigger. For a heartbeat, Nina and Brooks locked eyes, a final reckoning in the dawn. "You can't win," she said, her voice calm, almost pitying. "It's over, Brooks. The truth is out." He fired, the shot echoing like thunder. Nina dove, feeling the bullet graze her side, a flash of white-hot pain. Then Ash was there, battered and bleeding, placing himself between Nina and Brooks once more. Brooks fired again, but Ash took the bullet, a glancing wound, enough to stagger him but not stop him. Nina used the moment to close the distance, tackling Brooks to the ground. The two of them wrestled, years of betrayal and anger fueling Nina's strength. At last, she pinned him, wrenching the pistol from his grip. Carla arrived seconds later, breathless, and cuffed Brooks as the deputies rushed in to secure the scene. Carla raised her phone in triumph. "Upload's finished. Evidence is live and public. You're done, Brooks. The whole world will see what you've done." Nina knelt beside Ash, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "Thank you. You saved us. You saved me." Ash, wounded and barely able to stand, nudged Nina's hand with his nose. Around them, the station was a ruin, but justice had finally come. Not just for Nina, but for every ranger, every animal, every stolen piece of the land Brooks had tried to destroy. As the first rays of sun lit the blood and dust, backup swarmed the yard, medics tending to the wounded, deputies hauling Brooks and his mercenaries away. Nina sat beside Ash, Carla at her side, both women bruised and battered but unbowed. They had survived the worst night of their lives, and now, at last, the fight was over. For the first time in what felt like forever, Nina allowed herself to hope. The sun was fully up now, washing the battered ranger station in gold, but everything still felt sharp-edged, surreal, as if Nina were moving through someone else's story. The chaos of the night before slowly faded, replaced by a brittle quiet. Sheriff's deputies cordoned off the scene, paramedics tended the wounded, and Brooks, bloody, handcuffed, defeated, was loaded into the back of a cruiser, eyes burning with fury and shame. The evidence had gone public, and the world was watching. For Nina, the aftermath was a strange, suspended reality. Her wounds ached, the burn on her palms, the throbbing gash at her side, the bruises blooming beneath her ranger's uniform. But pain was only part of it. More overwhelming was the tidal wave of exhaustion, relief, and, most of all, loss. Justice had been served, but something had been broken that could never fully be put back together. Ash was the one who wouldn't let her fade into numbness as she sat on the stoop of the station, clutching a mug of bitter coffee. Ash limped over and rested his battered head on her shoulder. He was a mess, fur caked with dried blood, 2 raw bullet grazes on his side, his wild mane tangled with sweat and dirt. But his eyes were clear, and in that gaze Nina found something ancient, something she couldn't name. The town rallied around the station as news spread. People brought casseroles, first aid kits, flowers, and stories of other times Brooks had bent the law, or worse. Reporters snapped photos of the damage, especially the Mustang with the haunted eyes. "Is he yours?" they asked Nina again and again. "What will happen to the horse?" Her answer was always the same. "He's not mine. He's his own." Within days, the debate ignited. Wildlife officials, local activists, even ranchers who'd once cursed the wild herds, everyone wanted a say in Ash's future. Some argued he should be moved to a sanctuary, somewhere safe where his story could inspire visitors for years to come. Others worried that Ash, wild as he was, could never truly be safe around people, that his days roaming the mesa were over. "He saved your life," said one official, "but he's still a wild animal. If he stays, he could get hurt, or hurt someone." Nina listened to it all, her heart caught in her throat. She knew Ash wasn't just a symbol, he wasn't a pet or a mascot. He was wild, stubborn, free, a force that answered to no one but himself. If she tried to keep him, she'd be betraying everything he was. But the thought of letting him go, of losing that wordless, impossible connection, hurt more than any of her wounds. The argument grew heated. Some in the town wanted to fence him in, for his own good. Others pointed out how Ash had patrolled the roads, kept predators away, and even led lost hikers back to the trail. "He's earned his place," someone shouted at a community meeting. "If he wants to stay, let him stay." As the debate raged, Nina retreated to the quiet edge of the station yard, where the wild grasses met the battered fence. She found Ash there, grazing calmly, as if the fate of neither man nor horse mattered to him at all. She leaned against a fence post, running her fingers through his mane, letting the silence between them say what words never could. Carla joined her, eyes tired but warm. "You know, I think he's waiting for you to decide." Nina shook her head. "It's not up to me, Carla. It never was. The only thing I can give him is a choice." That night, under a silver wash of stars, Nina did what she knew in her bones was right. She walked with Ash to the edge of the mesa, far from the lights of the station. She brought nothing, no bridle, no halter, no reward. Just herself, her battered hope and her silent promise. She stroked his neck one last time, breathing in the scent of wild sage and sweat and desert dust. "You saved me, Ash. You don't owe me anything. If you want to run, run. If you want to stay, you know where to find me." She stepped back, fighting tears, her hands curling into fists to keep from reaching out. Ash stood for a long moment, tail flicking, watching her with eyes that caught the starlight. Then, without a sound, he turned and trotted away into the darkness, gray coat swallowed by the wild, ghost-like vanishing as he'd first appeared. Nina watched until even the memory of him blurred in the shadows. Then she walked back alone, every step heavier, but her heart lighter for having let him go on his own terms. The next few days were a blur of rebuilding, repairs to the station, paperwork, debriefings, endless calls from reporters and officials. Nina worked with her team, quieter now, but more certain of herself. She felt the loss of Ash keenly, but also a strange peace, knowing she had honored his spirit. And then, one dawn, as the world was just waking, Nina stepped out onto the porch with her coffee and saw a familiar gray shape at the edge of the fence line. Ash, battered but proud, stood watching the station. He didn't approach, not right away. He simply waited, the rising sun gilding his mane, as if reminding Nina and everyone else that true loyalty isn't about ownership or control. It's about choice. Nina smiled, tears on her cheeks, and whispered, "Welcome home. If you want to stay, you're free to choose." Ash snorted, shook his head, and trotted forward, crossing the boundary between wild and tame on his own terms. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Nina felt truly, fiercely alive. The scars on Black Mesa were not just physical. Burned patches of earth marked where trucks had torn through, and glass still glittered in the dirt near the battered ranger station. But as summer deepened, new grass pushed up through the wounds. Wildflowers reached for the sun, and something like normal life crept back onto the land. For Nina, healing was a slow, uneven journey. The bruises faded, her wounds scabbed over, but the pain in her shoulder lingered, and the limp in her step reminded her every morning of what she'd survived. She took comfort in small routines: coffee on the porch, checking fences at dawn, making sure every rookie knew how to run a patrol the right way. Carla became her confidant and her co-conspirator in rebuilding the station's battered morale. Together, they worked to erase Brooks's legacy of mistrust and secrecy, opening up every policy, every schedule, every budget to the whole team. But it was Ash who brought the most powerful change. The wild Mustang became more than a symbol. He became a daily presence, sometimes patrolling the perimeter alone, sometimes letting rookies feed him apples or even braid a bit of his tangled mane. Some mornings Ash would be gone, nowhere to be seen, only to return at dusk, a dust cloud heralding his arrival, as if he was checking on his wild kin before coming home. The team started calling him their Shadow Sentinel. Stories grew. Ash herding cattle off the highway again. Ash scaring off a hungry mountain lion. Ash leading a lost hiker back to a main road by blocking his path every time he tried to wander deeper into the mesa. One afternoon, Nina watched from the office as a new group of rangers argued over how to coax Ash closer for a health check. Jamal, more confident now, stood a respectful distance away, holding out a handful of oats and just talking softly. Ash watched him, head tilted, then stepped forward. No sudden moves, no commands, just quiet, patient respect. It worked. Ash let Jamal touch his shoulder, just for a second, before backing away and vanishing into the brush. The room erupted in laughter and applause, the tension that had haunted the station dissolving, at least for a moment. Ash's presence inspired something larger, too. After the story hit the news, wildlife officials reached out with a new idea, a Mustang recon unit, pairing experienced rangers with wild-born horses for patrols in the toughest country. Nina fought for it, arguing that the best way to protect the land wasn't with more walls or more guns, but with a partnership that respected wildness and honored trust. It was slow going. Some old-timers resisted, said horses couldn't be partners, only tools. But the community was changing. The scars from Brooks' betrayal ran deep, but so did the hope that things could be different. The first Mustang recon team formed that fall. Nina watched the ceremony, half official, half celebration, as 3 wild-caught Mustangs were released into a special training paddock with rangers who'd spent weeks learning their ways. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, stubbornness, and more than a little chaos. But Nina saw something in the faces of the rangers, and in the wild pride of the horses that she recognized from her own journey, the hard-won gift of trust. Through it all, Nina and Ash remained partners, but on equal footing. She never tried to confine him, never placed a bridle on his neck. On bad days, when the nightmares came or the pain grew too much, she would find him at the far fence line, his presence silent and reassuring. She'd talk to him, sometimes about the ambush, sometimes about her time in the army, sometimes about nothing at all. Ash never judged, never turned away. He just listened, his wild eyes full of understanding. It was the only therapy she needed. The whole community learned from Ash and Nina's example. Slowly, mistrust faded, replaced by a new sense of unity. The rangers started inviting townspeople to join their morning patrols, teaching them about the land, the wildlife, and the challenges they faced. At one public meeting, Nina stood up and spoke from the heart, her voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with every word. Real loyalty and trust can't be ordered or demanded. You have to earn them. After everything we've survived, after everything we lost, I learned that healing only happens when we stop trying to control each other and start listening, really listening, to what's wild and free in all of us. People remembered those words. Ranchers who once demanded roundups started leaving water out for wild horses during drought. School kids sent letters to the station, drawing pictures of Ash and the other Mustangs. The mesa began to feel less haunted by the past, and more like the start of something new. The pain of betrayal, Nina realized, would never fully disappear. Some scars are meant to remain, a reminder of what you survived and who you became because of it. But now, every time Ash returned at dawn, choosing to stay, never forced, she felt her own spirit knit itself back together, stronger and more resilient than before. And so the lesson from the canyon became more than just a story. It was a living truth. Unity and healing are possible, not through force or fear, but through respect, humility, and the courage to give and accept second chances. Late autumn on Black Mesa was a season of strange beauty. Morning frost glittered on the grass. Golden sunlight slanted through the canyons, and at dusk, the sky seemed to burn with 100 shades of red and violet. For Nina Brightcloud, Every sunrise was a gift she no longer took for granted. The pain in her shoulder lingered. Scars marked her skin, but her steps grew stronger with each passing day. Each dawn brought new challenges, but also the quiet promise of hope. The station itself was transformed. Gone were the secrets and whispered threats that Brooks had left behind. In their place, Nina and Carla built a culture of openness. Morning briefings in the open yard, where rangers shared their thoughts and concerns without fear. The Mustang Recon Unit, once a wild idea, was now a reality. Rangers learned to work alongside their untamed partners, each side growing in trust and respect. The community, once divided, came together with a new sense of pride and ownership. Ash became the living emblem of that change. He was neither pet nor prisoner, neither wholly wild nor truly tame. He moved as he wished, sometimes vanishing for days into the open range, sometimes standing guard at the edge of the station, eyes sharp, ears flicking at the slightest sound. Children drew pictures of him. The local newspaper ran stories of his courage, and volunteers flocked to the station, eager to help protect the wild herds that roamed the mesa. Nina often thought about the night of the attack, about the darkness she'd survived, and the friends she'd nearly lost. But she refused to let those memories poison her future. Instead, she carried them as proof of her own resilience, and as a reminder of what real justice meant. The investigation that followed Brooks' arrest brought sweeping changes. Corruption was rooted out at every level of the agency. New policies were written, and rangers found their voices again. Some left, unable to let go of old ways. Most stayed, determined to build something better from the ashes. One day, a delegation from the state government arrived at the station. They came to honor Nina, Carla, and the whole ranger team for their bravery and integrity. There was a small ceremony on the porch, the wind whipping flags and coats. The community gathered close. A state official, stiff in his suit, read a proclamation about courage, sacrifice, and the spirit of the West. But the words that mattered most came from Carla, who spoke softly, simply. We survived because we trusted each other, and because we remembered that the wild doesn't need to be conquered. It needs to be respected. Nina felt tears prick her eyes as she accepted her commendation. But the real reward, she knew, waited outside the boundaries of medals and speeches. After the ceremony, as the crowd drifted away, Nina found Ash grazing alone at the edge of a sunlit field. She walked up to him, running her hand along his neck, marveling at how far they had both come. You changed everything, she whispered. Not just for me, for all of us. Ash flicked his tail, lowered his head, and nuzzled her hand. In that moment, Nina understood. His loyalty had never been about obligation or gratitude. It was something deeper, a shared commitment to survival, healing, and the freedom to choose one's own path. He stayed because he wanted to. She smiled, letting the peace of that truth settle inside her. Life didn't return to normal. It became something better, messier, sometimes harder, but honest and bright. The new Mustang Recon Unit inspired other agencies across the country. Teams from Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado came to see how Nina's Rangers worked with the wild horses, learning the value of partnership over dominance. Young people applied for internships at the station, hungry to be part of the new era. Nina and Carla became mentors, guiding new rangers, teaching them not just about the land and its dangers, but about listening, really listening, to each other and to the wild. Mistakes still happened. Storms still came. But each time the station was tested, the team faced it together, stronger for what they'd overcome. Ash's legend only grew Local schools started wild horse days, raising money for conservation and hosting field trips to the mesa. Poaching dropped off, thanks in part to the new vigilance and in part to the sense that everyone, not just the rangers, now had a stake in the land's future. People said the spirit of the West had come alive again, not in the myth of taming the wild, but in the truth of honoring it. On the anniversary of the ambush, the team gathered at dawn on the high ridge. Nina spoke last, her voice sure and steady. True loyalty, like freedom, can't be forced. It must be chosen. We owe it to ourselves, to the land, and to every creature here to keep choosing what's right. Even when it's hard, even when we're scared. Because the wild teaches us to heal, to trust, and to never give up. The sun rose behind them, lighting up the faces of her friends, her community, her wild companion. Ash stood at her side, fierce and proud, his shadow long and unbroken across the mesa. Their story spread far beyond the canyon, across towns, states, and hearts. Nina's journey from betrayal to hope became a call to action. More rangers, more towns, more people learned that real healing and courage often come from the wildest places, and that sometimes the bravest guardians are the ones who return, not because they have to, but because they believe. So if their story moved you, share it. Let it remind you that unity and justice begin with a single act of trust, that the wild, within us and around us, has the power to save and to heal, if only we have the courage to listen. And as long as wild horses run and the mesa breathes, Nina and Ash's legacy will live on, a testament to the strength it takes not just to survive, but to choose freedom, to choose loyalty, and to choose each other again and again.